What is going on? No horsing around, family. Zach Boyd back at it again. Another live stream, Thursday night edition. And we thought it'd be cool to bring George on. He's been a friend of the show for a while. He's always on the Colts beat. Him and Ryan do a great job over there on their podcast as well. George, how you been, my man?
Doing well. A little busy, but, that's what spring is for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So like we always like to do on this one, George, we just dive right into it. This is going to be a free agency centric, kind of getting primed up, ready to go for next week. And I guess we'll just start here, George. Let's just start with in-house because Chris Ballard in the past has always loved to sign his own. I don't think this year's going to quite be that way though, George. I don't think they're, if you want to talk about the marquee, Bobby Okereke, players like that, that market's heavy. You got to think Chicago's going to be in the mix for that. And you're already paying one guy on one side $20 million a year. I think this is going to be a casualty as it goes. Any chance, though, just for you, and I'll let you answer it fully, any chance that franchise tag gets hit on them? I say no, but just curious if they would do something like that.
No, I think the deadline, it was Tuesday. I'm not 100% sure. I get dates mixed up all the time. I'm starting to get old. Like I can blame everything on that now. My brain cells are leaving me. But no, and I think with Bobby in particular, I never really thought it was a great chance he would come back. But when Zaire Franklin came out and had the season that he had, I think he just cemented it. You usually only use two linebackers in today's NFL anyway. So you've got Zaire and you've got Shaq. Maybe you can bring back EJ Speed, although I'm not even 100% sure on that one. I think there's going to be competition for him as well, specifically from Cleveland, especially with Bubba and Trone over there now. But also, if you look at Chris Ballard's track record of drafting linebackers, you could argue that's the best position that he's had. They've got JoJo Doman waiting in the wings right now. He can probably compete for that third spot and kind of fill the role that Speed had. But also, I think based on what he's done in the past, I think Chris Ballard should be very confident he can find a linebacker even on day 3.
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on. I think no franchise tag. He usually doesn't do that anyways. I think the last franchise tag was on Pat McAfee, and it's just going to be some guys and some change is probably necessary in this case. Let's talk about a couple guys when you want to talk about freeing up some cap space so you'll have a little bit of money to spend if you decide to go that route. Matt Ryan, Nick Foles. I've heard a little bit of rumblings of Ryan Kelly. My thoughts are maybe you go to him first if he wants to restructure, then you maybe go down that road. Just what are you hearing? What's the sense and the pulse that you're getting in the building on West 56 as far as, who's going to go and who's going to stay, just in your opinion?
Yeah, they've been pretty quiet over there as per usual. I think they've been more locked down this year than they have been in years past, and it's never really a leaky ship. So that's always interesting to try to follow. But the thought for a while has been that Matt Ryan will be released if he doesn't retire, and I don't think that he's planning on doing that. Nick Foles also will be released, may end up in Carolina. We'll see. That wouldn't surprise me if he heads out that way, if he wants to play again. And then the Ryan Kelly thing I think is really interesting because, one, can you get a trade market? Can you build around? Could you get maybe a day 3 pick for him? Also, like you said, can you do a restructure? Can you work some things around with him? I think the Colts still like him, but you reach a point where I think right now they've got like $12 million. You're going to have to free up some money somewhere. So beyond the quarterbacks, which will be a decent little number there that will come back. I think 17 million with Matt Ryan. Yeah, probably $5-6 million, something in that neighborhood with Nick Foles. So, that's not bad right there. That'll push you up into the 30s for total cap space, which is, that's workable. You can definitely make that happen. But I do think they're going to look there. And I also wonder, is DeForest Buckner a restructure candidate, or is he a guy that maybe you can go to and look for him? There's going to be a lot of questions like that this offseason that really haven't been asked in the past because they've always had like $90 million of cap space, and now they don't. So you got to go and find it somewhere.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I just think to myself, George, just going to probably be a little bit of turnover and change in the direction of the team. Kenny Moore is another guy I would really look out for. You cut him and you really, I mean, it's a clean cut. Very rarely in the NFL can you cut a guy and really not have any cap hit at all, but it's just no dead money left over. I would maybe push back on that a little bit and say they might want to wait on that. And if they want to package something with Chicago, via the draft, obviously Kenny would love to be in that Matt Eberflus defense. He made no bones about it this offseason. I mean, he was about as transparent as he could be, when it comes to that situation. He didn't click with Gus Bradley in that defense. And you could tell he didn't seem to have fun playing football this year. I know he dealt with a few injuries towards the end of the season, especially, but man, I mean, he might be a guy either way as far as that goes. Kind of a hot topic, George. It's not necessarily Colts related. It could turn into something, at some point. We have the news that breaks out that Lamar Jackson's going to get this, non-exclusive tag. Everybody's is able to negotiate with a guy who's a former MVP, still a pretty young guy. And I mean, I have never in my life seen teams go so quickly to the NFL insiders to say, we're out. I mean, that was just an odd thing. I don't think I expected it, not whatsoever. Just so I thought it would be, pertinent to bring it up on this live stream. What do you think's going on with the Lamar Jackson situation? You think there's a lot of posturing going on, or do you think that this is more of owners getting behind each other and saying, listen, we really messed up doing this fully guaranteed deal with Deshaun Watson last year, and we cannot go down this path again?
There's definitely a lot of people mad at Cleveland for the Deshaun Watson deal. There's no doubt about that. Very upset with that being fully guaranteed and the number as high as it was. That happened literally when the ink was dry on the contract. There were 31 other owners very upset with Jimmy Haslam and that group over there. But I think a lot of it's posturing, and a lot of it is teams, in my estimation, trying to get out ahead of a PR problem for them. If you come out now, and you say, hey, we're in, we want Lamar Jackson, and you don't get him, which right now the odds are you won't. I mean, Baltimore can match any deal. So I think I saw in the 30 years of free agency, only one player has ever changed teams via the non-exclusive tag, and no quarterbacks. The closest was Matt Castle, but he was traded outside of that. They matched the contract and then traded him. I think the odds of another team getting him are still really low. So if you come out now and you say, I'm all in, and this is the direction we're going in, and you don't get him, you got to go back to your fan base, and you got to go back to your quarterback and say, we weren't all that in, you got to be careful with that this time of year, because we've seen it, Cosper last year in Cleveland with the Deshaun Watson thing. I think the Baker Mayfield Browns marriage was on the rocks anyway, but that precipitated the divorce. And I think you're going to, and to a lesser degree, the Falcons' pursuit of Deshaun Watson, ended up severing ties with Matt Ryan. So I think teams are cognizant of that as much as anything right now, just trying to make sure that they don't lose the guy they've got. Because, again, I don't know, what chance would you give? 10%, 5% that the team that, eventually would make an offer actually gets them?
Yeah, I mean, it's not very good. And, I'm a big Pacers fan. Same thing happened last year. You go out and you think you got DeAndre Ayton, you sign him to this deal, and then the Suns just that's all they were waiting for, right? They wanted the rest of the league to set the market, and they come back in and get them. And now you spent half a season just basically telling Miles, it's all right, man. We're going to have to bring and reel him back in. Kind of a unique situation to be in. That being said, if I'm a Colts fan, and I am, I don't think I want Lamar. I think I go the younger route. It just gives you flexibility, George, right? To build this team around a young quarterback on a rookie deal. If you really want to be advantageous in free agency and just build players and sign your own, Michael Pittman Jr., Jonathan Taylor maybe down the road, as you have already with Quentin Nelson, Shaq Leonard. That really helps if you have a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal. And I think that's the route I would go. Would you kick the tires on Lamar if you're Chris Ballard in the Indianapolis Colts, or is that something you say, you know what, we're going to pass on this one right now. We went down this road several times in a different direction, but we're probably still going to pass even on a younger, enticing quarterback.
I think he's more interesting because of the age and because of the high level play that you've seen from him recently. But I think for me, the biggest question I have is the injuries. Especially with this franchise, can you get past that hurdle? I mean, we all know, what happened with Andrew Luck here. And now you're dealing with, it was 2 years running where Lamar's not been able to finish the season.
Yeah.
That would give me pause from an Indianapolis standpoint. I think they've got any option that could end this carousel they've got to look into. And that's certainly an option that could end the carousel. I don't think they have to worry about, angering a quarterback already on the roster. So that's not an issue for them. They're a team that could make an offer and I think would feel, pretty good in doing that. They're not going to have any repercussions from Baltimore matching. But at the same time, do you want to do Baltimore's work for them? I think that's the other end of this. If you're the Ravens, you kind of sit back now, wait for somebody else to hammer out a contract and, hey, nice. They did our job for us. We match. He's coming back. Situation's over. But if you're that other team, do you want to put in that effort, that time? You want to bring Lamar in, wine and dine him, sit down with his agent, come up with it. Like you're talking about the Pacers, come up with this deal, try to put whatever poison pill you can into it, try to make it as tough to match as you can, which is going to be hard on Indianapolis' part right now because they don't have the cap space either. So, it's going to be hard for them to put something in year one that Baltimore couldn't match. I just think all those reasons, if he was healthy, then I think I would be all in on this and saying, hey, here's a guy in his prime, bring him in, build around him. You can pretty easily imagine him and Shane Steichen's offense and how much fun that could be. But I just think the injury situation, the cap situation, and the very low chance of actually getting him, all of that to me would make me pass.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you on that, George. I just very enticing. I have to be honest. It's very enticing, but we've seen this with Andrew Luck, even not nearly to the degree we've seen with Lamar Jackson, who's an electric runner, but their bodies tend to break down, right? Like you're just not getting a quarterback that's going to last 12, 15, 16 years in the modern NFL if all you're doing is running. Now, however, if you're using those legs, for that functional capability just to kind of buy a little more time in the pocket, that traditionally translates very well. I'm not sure his body holds up 5 years from now. I don't even know if he makes it through the contract. You mentioned a really good point. 2 seasons, Lamar Jackson's MIA, right, at the end of the season when you need him the most because he's just put up with so much of that wear and tear. So should be interesting. We want to talk about getting into free agency, positions of need, some areas if Chris Ballard, and we always say big if around here because we know how it's been in the past. And honestly, George, I don't expect a drastic change. Maybe he goes out and makes a big splash, early on just to kind of change it up a little bit. But if he does, what positions would you be targeting if you were Chris Ballard to upgrade this football team?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an offensive-oriented. When you look at the struggles on that side of the ball, and really – until the last month of the season, the defense played at a playoff level, where they were probably a team. They were playing well enough to get you to the postseason. Then they had, for a multitude of reasons, they were not able to finish the season well at all. And I think that's going to be addressed as well. But the offense just couldn't move the ball. And some of that was quarterback. There's no question. Bringing in a rookie is going to help. But I think you can't bring in a 22, 23-year-old kid, 21-year-old kid in one case, and say, here's keys, fix it. I don't think that's realistic. I think you're going to have to give him some help. The offensive line, Ballard's at the combine. They need to add competition there. They need to make sure that they've got enough bodies and that they can get back to the level that they expect to play at. The other spot, to me, that really is screaming is that slot receiver position. If Paris Campbell's not re-signed, I don't know who else on the roster really fits that role. And even if Paris Campbell's back, if you look at the Eagles, when I watch Super Bowl, and you're obviously watching that Eagles offense with a different eye because you knew at that time he was coming. The one thing that I thought was the biggest difference between what the Colts do and what the Eagles do, so many of those Eagles skill position guys are shifty. They're real elusive. They can break tackles in the open field, just make guys miss. I don't know that, Nyheim Hines was that way here. I don't know if there was anybody else on the Colts roster that they're more straight line guys, And so I think even if Paris Campbell's back, you'd want to find one of those slippery kind of wide receivers that can catch that underneath pass out in space, make a linebacker miss, and turn it into a big game. So I think that's something. I don't know if that comes in free agency, if it comes in the draft, but I think that would be a real across the board on the offensive skill position players, just finding those kind of shifty Darren Sproles type guys.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Ballard was pretty transparent with us, when he had the presser at the combine. It's the only position he came out and said we'll probably address it in free agency and the draft, right? So, I mean, that means that he's looking to do something there when it comes to the offensive line. Now, big name, obviously, you can correlate the two together. Isaac Seumalo from the Eagles is going to be a big, high-priced guy. Shane Steichen obviously has a track record and a history with him. I tend to think, George, that Chris is going to go on a little bit on the lower end and look a little bit more for that value guy. And to Chris's credit, he's been pretty good in that situation. When he went out a couple years ago and got a Chris Reed, he's been able to find really good quality starters. Hell, he even found Mark Lewinsky, several years back the same way. So I don't know that you need to go for the huge splash, but I definitely think that he's preached competition. You probably need to have actual real competition on that offensive line. You were down there in training camp. I was down there in training camp. Offensive line was a problem from the beginning. It looked bad, and I think I tried to talk myself into it's just the preseason. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. But what we saw in training camp, that just translated into the season, right, George? I mean,
absolutely,
it wasn't good at all.
No, and it's always tough there because you say, well, they're not in pads all that often, and when they are, it's not game speed, not true game speed. So, like you said, you can talk yourself out of a lot of things, you talk yourself into a lot of things when it's not real football. Still, it's getting closer. It looks more like real football, but you're out there. It's not game day. But the issues that were evident there continued, and I think what you said, real competition. It didn't happen during training camp. I mean, that line was pretty well set. There were a couple days where there were a little bit of experiments. We saw that Braden Smith at guard line that they used against Denver, I think twice, maybe, during training camp. But there was no sense of, this is Raymond's day at left tackle. This is Pryor's day at left tackle. This is Fry's day at right guard. This is Pinner's day at right guard. Pryor and Pinner were pretty much handed those jobs. And, that's where the struggle started. I don't think breaking news here. I think everybody's pretty aware of that and how the season unfolded. And then the guys, and Ballard mentioned it, the guys that you paid big money to, the guys that are supposed to be the anchors of the line weren't for most of the year. And so it's got to start there. Your big guys, your stars have got to play like stars. And then beyond that, there needs to be honest, open, tough competition at those open spots, which I think honestly just the coaching change will do that. And not saying that as a knock on the previous staff, saying anywhere in the NFL, a new coach comes in, that first year competition increases because nobody's got a credit in the bank. Nobody's, a favorite. Nobody's won a battle before, so those jobs become wide open. And I think you're going to get some of that just because of that. But I think you've got to bring in real competition. And like you said, whether, is it going to be big money guys? Probably not. Would you like to see Orlando Brown come in here? Sure. 31 teams would probably be for that. But is it realistic? Probably not. Maybe somebody like Andre Dillard. I don't know. That might be as high as they go. But we know by now what the Ballard mold looks like. Somebody between 25 and 27 who has flashes, has shown in a lesser role that maybe they're ready for more time, and you're going to bring them in and give them that opportunity. That's what I would look for.
Yeah, I think you're spot on when it comes to that. Guys, before we go, we're almost about 20 minutes on this live stream. I just want to take a quick second and thank each and every one of you guys. We're almost up to 2,500 subscribers here on YouTube. Stephen and I do it the best we can to interact with every single interaction that you guys throw out there for us. But it's all about you. The comments, the reason we do these live streams is totally about you guys. So if you have questions for George, feel free to throw them up there. We'll get to them as we go down the line. But just want to take a quick second. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed, if you haven't joined the No Horsing Around family, we invite you to do that right now. Just hit that subscribe button, hit that alert button. You'll get all of the latest and greatest stuff that we put out as we're moving down the forward. Basil's got a pretty cool point. I guess we'll pivot. Jamel Dean is going to be a big name that you're going to see out there. Now, that's not going to be a cheap one, when it comes to it. But you've got him, you've got James Bradbury, you've got, Gardner Johnson. There's going to be some enticing guys at cornerback. Are there any players that you're just looking at any position? I don't care what it is, George. Are there any players that you're looking at and you think, I might give that guy a look, a little more so necessarily than just your role player, your glue guy, maybe a guy that can add a little juice, like you mentioned earlier, a different element to the football team.
I don't know if I've got any specific guys. I usually don't in free agency, and this year in particular, it's so quarterback centric right now.
Yeah.
It's almost crazy. But I do think, you start in the usual places, Eagles and Chargers. They're going to have the most experience with Shane Steichen. And they don't have to be current Eagles and Chargers, anybody who came through that system while he was there. And you also look around that, the Doug Peterson, Frank Reich, Nick Sirianni tree is pretty prevalent right now. There's a lot of teams out there playing some version of this offense. So any of those teams, I think, are going to be on that list just because they're guys that have been in the system. And I think you go right away with them, especially in year one for Shane. You want guys who know sort of the way practice goes and can come in and be those coaches on the field. I'd look for that. And then, like I said, that Ballard kind of prototype, these 25 to 27-year-old kids with a chip on their shoulder who maybe have gotten a spot here and there but haven't been a full-time starter. Danico Autry, I think, is sort of the, poster boy for that.
Sure.
Coming in, I remember when he signed, people were, who is this? Right. And he started doing some research, and everybody, with the Raiders is saying, hey, this guy's on the verge of a breakout. Comes in and ends up signing a bigger deal with Tennessee. That's a whole other story. But was a very productive and good player for this defense. And guys like that are what you're looking for this year, guys who can come in, take that next step, and like you said, bring some fire in and maybe, light a little bit of a fire. Not that the team needs it, because it's going to be there. Shane Steichen coming in, it's going to be there. But I think driving that point home even more when you come in on day one and you look at the locker next to you and it's a guy trying to take your job.
Yeah, there's no question. And competition's probably going to be at an all-time high this year. You mentioned Shane Steichen coming in. He's not vested in anybody, right? Like, he just wants to win. This is his very first opportunity to get in the NFL. He's coming from a winning system, and that feels pretty good if you're a head coach. You don't want to go out of that. You want to ride that wave. Paris Campbell is going to hit the market here in a week if he doesn't get re-signed. Thoughts on Paris Campbell? Just your gut. Are we gonna maybe go out and try to give him a 1-year deal, or do you think that we say, you know what, Ballard in the past has always been pretty good with players and communicating, saying, hey, go out there and see what the market says, come back to us, and we'll let you know if we want to match that offer. Do you think that's more of the approach that we take with Paris?
That's my sense, especially with the injuries. He was healthy last year, which was great. Good to see. Good for him. He's been productive when he's been on the field, so they know what they've got. But at the same time, you have to wonder what the market is when he missed the majority of his career here so far. So I think you let him go out and look around, and you may lose him as a result. It's very possible the number that comes back is one, much like with Autry, that you just don't feel comfortable with. And I think everybody knows Carolina's going to be high on that list. Yeah. His relationship with Frank Reich has been very well detailed. He was talking to him even last year after Reich was fired. I don't think there's any secret that that's going to be someone in the mix here. But I also think the Eagles could possibly be in the mix at the right price because Nick Sirianni is another huge fan of Paris Campbell. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears get in on this. He wasn't at Ohio State with Justin Fields, but they certainly ran the same offense in college. They know each other pretty well. And Matt Eberflus is another guy with a lot of respect for Paris Campbell. And the Bears have more money than they know what to do with. So, I mean, if there's a team that could just throw a pile of cash at him, it's Chicago. And I think that's, those are the kind of things that can happen when you let them test the market. David Tepper's got more money than anyone probably needs in any lifetime. He could throw a ton of money at Paris Campbell. The Bears could do it. Someone I'm not thinking of could do it, or if you're Paris, do you want to go like to Kansas City and sign a short-term deal, but play in that offense for a year and maybe make your big money next year? So I think his family enjoys living here. I think that helps, the fact that they like where they're at. They like Indianapolis in general. I think he is a guy who liked his time here. He's well liked by the front office. I would think Shane Steichen would be a fan, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I don't know, what, 1 year, $6-7 million. If it gets more than that, in my opinion, I think you just got to let him test the market for sure. Will Drum says Paris, could be re-signed on a 1 or 2 year deal. He shouldn't be too expensive. I would agree. If I'm a general manager anywhere, especially the Indianapolis Colts, I got to see 1 more year.
Muted. It's spinning.
But I definitely think
9:30 that happens.
Let's just see here. Basel. No,
I saw it going and I stopped talking.
And he's made of glass. Everyone would be injured based on his hits. George has some technical difficulties. Basel always with good points. Hey, Nomad, Wombat, Basel, Will, super grateful that you guys, Uncouth, had some stuff in here earlier. Didn't get a chance to get his stuff up, which I want to. Sarah always gets in here and comments as well. Colton has been lighting us up here recently. Paris deal is already a done deal, apparently. Wow. He likes the idea of the Paris Campbell. Let me get that one up there. 2 years, no more than $12 or $14 million. Pretty cool. So, guys, I want to ask you guys a question. What would be your number one free agent that you would want the most? If you could add somebody, if you could bring anybody in, I don't care where they play, defense, offense, all of that good stuff. Where would you want to bring those guys in? I think for me, I definitely want to get a good right guard when we're talking about free agency. There's no question about that. I might spend up a little bit. However, if you're going to go out and get a guy like Ciamola, you're definitely going to have to talk to Ryan Kelly and get that cap hit to go down. I can't imagine having, a Ciamola, a Quentin Nelson, a Braden Smith, and a Ryan Kelly on a full $10 or $12 million deal, all on the same offensive line. And if you do, and you don't have a top 3 offensive line in the NFL, I mean, fans are going to come for you. George, we were just talking about just kind of maybe if you were going to make a splash, I think the group was kind of saying that right guard is a position that if you were going to dive and go a little heavier than usual, that might be something that you might explore as far as that goes.
Yeah, because, I think left tackle is going to be out of the price range. And wide receiver probably too. I mean, that market's really exploded the last couple of years. Right guard's probably the spot where you could get somebody who can make a difference and they can afford it. But like you said, probably going to have to go to Ryan Kelly and try to get some of the money there because that would be a ton of cash in there. But, we'll find out how committed they are. I mean, when Chris Ballard says we will be good on the offensive line, we'll find out how much he meant that, pretty soon here.
Yeah, I think they're all onto something. I do think he's going to spend up. I think Chris Ballard, if you asked him and you had truth serum and you put it in him right now, I think the one thing that he was most frustrated with was with the offensive line, the way they played last year. And let's be honest, the good players on this football team didn't play like they had played in the past. Not really any of them. You'd probably have to exclude, DeForest Buckner. I thought he had a real solid season. Start off a little bit slow that first week or two, but he really played well as the season went on. But Quentin Nelson, I mean, he was not Quentin Nelson. I don't ever remember time, George, seeing Quentin Nelson literally get pushed over backwards onto the ground. Like, that's just that's not something we've seen here in Indianapolis. Anyways, let's flip over to just, you've got a lot of these guys are going to be casualties. Might be an opportunity for, the Colts to swoop in there in free agency. You've got DeAndre Hopkins, who they're looking to trade, but might have to be a casualty. You're hearing word out of Minnesota, Adam Thielen's going to be on the market. Might that be a viable route when it comes to free agency, saying, okay, we're going to take these well-established guys who we know are good football players, probably have another 2 or 3 good years in the tank, and see if we can't pair them up with a young quarterback so you can feel a little more confident about who he's throwing that football to, in those big moments and those big stressful situations.
Yeah, that's a blueprint we've seen Chris Ballard follow before. Not so much on offense, but we've seen it just last year with Stephon Gilmore. We've seen it with Justin Houston a few years ago. Guys that he trusts, who he brings in on good money, but not crazy money, who he can – veteran leaders, And I think the receiver group is a really good spot for that. I think Michael Pittman did a really good job as a leader in that group. He's still a young guy himself. I think it would be a good idea to bring in an old head in there, somebody who can kind of be a lieutenant for Reggie Wayne in that room, who's seen it all and done it all. And as you said, just being a security blanket for that rookie quarterback, that everything that they do this year should be seen in light of that rookie quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get them help. And speaking of that rookie quarterback, be impossible to have a podcast, I feel like, without talking about any type of rookie stuff. George, you've talked at it at nauseum at this point, but we'll bring it up. People love to talk about it and they love to debate it. Probably got 4 guys that are in the runnings when you want to talk about Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. Richardson did an unbelievable job as far as metrics go. We all saw that, right? Like we saw that. When I look at the combine, for me, it's more, George, for me, as a verification of things that we thought we saw on tape, right? That's what I'm really looking for. And it all held true. I don't think anybody knew that Anthony Richardson was going to be this freakish of an athlete, but he doesn't move up my board a whole lot. I probably move him from 4 to 3, but I still think Stroud and Bryce Young are clearly the 1 and 2. What just your thoughts on this crop, this young quarterback class, who, hell, you don't know. You could get 3 or 4 of these guys going top 5 this year.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's an interesting group. And I think I said before, one of the most fascinating draft years ever, just because we have no idea who's going to pick first. We have no idea, therefore, who the first quarterback off the board is going to be, because I think the team that's up there it could change drastically from one team to the next, whoever gets in that spot. And what they want. I also think for me, it's almost hysterical. The Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson debate is so much fun because you could not find 2 more polar opposite prospects. Yeah. One is tiny with great tape. The other is huge with questionable tape. They're just absolutely at every turn the yin and yang of each other. It's really insane. And that makes it fun too, because there's, of course, opinions all over on the board on those 2, because it depends on which way you want to lean towards. I will say, being in the building on Saturday, watching when they were warming up, watching Anthony Richardson throw flat-footed and just flipping his wrist like he's just throwing a baseball in the front yard, and the ball's flying 50 yards effortlessly in the air. That's impressive. Sure. But like you said, at the end of the day, I don't know if it overcomes the questions that you have about him from his time at Florida. It's not hard at all to see why scouts and coaches will fall in love with this guy. And it's not hard at all to see the potential, but it's got to happen. You've got to bring it onto the field. I agree. I probably put him ahead of Levis coming out of the combine. But I think Young and Stroud, whatever order you want to go in, they're just, if you look at the boxes the Colts repeatedly talk about, quick processors, accuracy, playmaking, good decision making. They're the two that check those boxes the most. And the Colts also haven't come out and said it, but reading between the lines, they want somebody who's going to be ready to play sooner than later. I know Ballard said they all need development. And they do. Even Andrew Luck needed development when he got here. Nobody is NFL ready in that regard. That's a misnomer. But certainly Stroud and Young closer to being able to play in year one right now, at least in the consensus scouting reports, than Levis and Richardson. And so I think that's the way the Colts are going to lean. But again, do they go up to 1 to get one of these guys? Do they take their chances at 4? And if they do, then I think Richardson comes into the picture because he has to. If you're sitting there at 4, you may lose both of those guys. So I think it's fascinating to watch. And I think the one thing I don't agree with that's kind of out there is that they're all 4 the same, that there's not much difference, that if you get one, it's the same as getting the others. I think there's incredibly different styles here, incredibly different approaches. Personalities are very different, having been in the room with them now. And I think at quarterback, all that matters because you've got to build for that guy. And they said they will. Both Steichen and Ballard said they're going to build the offense around the quarterback, not the other way around. They're not going to fit the quarterback into the scheme. But that starts to me before the draft. You got to know who you want, and you start building around that guy on Wednesday. Well, I guess on Monday when you can start talking to people, because the type of receiver that you're going to get for Bryce Young is not the same receiver you're going to get for Anthony Richardson. Exactly. And I think that's why it's important you get the guy you want.
Yeah, I mean, and you're so right when you say all 4 are just completely different. On the surface, it'd be very easy to compare Richardson and Levis together because they both have these huge arms, right? They can move a little bit. But when you really look at them, I mean, they're the polar opposite. I mean, Richardson is a dynamic runner. I think if anything, what he did for me in the combine, he kind of raised his floor, right? I don't know about the ceiling necessarily because that ceiling's always been really high, but his floor raised because I think what you can have in Richardson, especially early on, regardless of how he can throw the football, with his legs, he's going to move the chains. I mean, he's just that type of a football player. Decision making, 54% in college, not good at all. And the argument I've made with people who love Richardson, and I understand it, by the way. I mean, he's a special player. Is let's just say you get in the NFL and you develop this guy to be 5 or 6% better in the NFL. That's still 59 or 60%. Right before we got on this podcast, I looked up the NFL to rank percentages of quarterbacks last year. That would be dead last. If you were 59 or 60% of any starting quarterback, you would be ranked 32nd. And I just don't think that the accuracy with Richardson is going to line up with, Steichen and Ballard, because they made 2 really big points to me when they were both talking at the end of the season. One was accuracy meant so much to them. And I think Ballard and Steichen kind of went out of their way at the combine presser to mention that size was not going to be that big of a deal. Now, you don't know if that's more of a smokescreen than anything else, but that being said, size is not going to be the indicator of which direction they're going to go. And you mentioned a good point, and we'll probably finish up with this. I don't know that you can afford to sit there at 4. And get your guy. Because the honest truth is, George, I don't know if you will get your guy if you just sit there at 4, because you could go 1, 2, 3 quarterback in this draft. I'm not going to be blown away. Probably won't happen, but if it happens, it's not shocking me at all.
No, I mean, both the Bears and the Cardinals have made it pretty obvious that they're open for business. And Chicago is very, very open for business. I think Arizona would like to be. And once the Bears make their deal, which seems inevitable at this point, then Arizona's market's going to heat up, because once the Bears have made a trade, we'll start to get an idea of, okay, whoever it is leaning in this direction. Then you're going to start hearing which direction Houston's leaning in. And then everyone's going to race to 3 for whatever's left. So I think it's critical, and to me, the biggest thing about this draft is this is a rare opportunity. With the assets that they have this year, it's a rare opportunity to go get your guy and solve this carousel, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle that.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. There's going to be a lot of talk. We're going to talk about it probably every single week leading up to the actual draft. But it really is true, and it's just so fluid right now, George, because we could very well sit there and be picking right at 4, and the board could fall perfectly for us. However, we can make this huge move and move up to 1. Maybe Chicago does something crazy. They trade back to 2, and then they end up trading back to 4. Doubling up on those draft picks. Maybe we just swap 3 for 4 with Arizona. There's so many things on the table. That being said, and I think you sprinkle in the Jalen Carter situation that kind of muddied up the waters a little bit, because you had 2 guys who were clearly going to be the 2 first defensive players taken. Now you don't know what's going to go on with Jalen Carter. And I don't know if you want to be that GM, with the top 5 or 6 pick, calling that name out. I mean, it just, gosh, I mean, what could come with that? And the guy might not ever even be able to play football, if things go in that direction. More to come, I'm sure, down the road in his situation. But George, any final thoughts just kind of before we get off here, free agency, anything that you're looking for? You're going to say, hey, man, I'm really curious to see just maybe a difference in approach, just anything as we head into free agency here next week.
Yeah, one of the things Ryan and I were talking about this week on the podcast that I think is really interesting is kind of watching these first couple of weeks of free agency. I don't know, the first wave, I don't think is going to tell you much, because Ballard never really gets involved in that first wave, and I don't expect him to this year. If he does, it'll be at a lower cost. It won't be, for that big splash guy. But if there's a higher number of guys, which you would expect anyway with a new coach, but if it really stands out, it might be a hint that maybe they're trying to trade up and you're trying to replace some of those draft picks with more free agents. For me, it's something to keep an eye on, see if their behavior changes drastically. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. But I think that's one of the things we're going to be talking about probably over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it should be fun, guys. We appreciate you so much for joining this live stream tonight. Steven couldn't make it. He had a little bit of an obligation with the fam, so George stepped in, helped us out a lot. More to come when it comes to free agency, guys. More to come when it comes to draft, breaking news, everything. Like I said earlier, if you haven't joined the family, go ahead and do that. Hit that bell. Then when you're done doing that, go over to the Blue Horseshoe podcast. Go over and check out George and Ryan. They do a great job. They're now on YouTube, right, George?
Yep, we're on YouTube now. So everyone can see, my beautiful face every day.
Yeah, man. I mean, hey, it's okay. Hey, the bearded men need a place in the YouTube world. That's what I say. The bearded men need a YouTube space. Guys, like we always do, I'll end it the same way. I love you. George loves you. And we're out.